Our scripture lesson for today comes out of the book of Esther, and I'll be reading from the 4th chapter, the 9th through the 17th verse. However, I would encourage you to read the whole chapter when you have time. Actually, I'd encourage you to read the entire book of Esther. It's very short, and it's actually a very interesting read. But the 4th chapter, the 9th through the 17th verse says, Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message for Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. I myself have not been called to come into the king for 30 days. And when they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter. But you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for such a time as this. Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that, I will go to the king, though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. I want to say a word today from the topic, no catfish. No catfish. Recently I watched a show called The Circle. It's actually a social media show where people are living in the same building, but only speak to each other through a chat like they would do if they were online with emojis and everything. Each player provides a picture and a bio, but the trick is they can be whoever they want to be. So some of them play the whole game as a catfish. That is someone who is completely different than who they really are. It's strange to watch people try to lie and manipulate each other in order to be the last one standing at the end of the game. As I watched the show this week, I couldn't help but think of what would make someone want to do that. It's hard enough to live in the real world with all the lies and the manipulation that we're exposed to on a regular basis. It makes me cringe when I think about the 2022 elections. We're already starting to see some political ads. Even though it's only 2021, I also get queasy when I imagine what 2024 is going to be like. When we look at all of the people who are influenced, tricked, and sometimes brainwashed via social media, like those who believe alternative facts and make plans to destroy and disrupt, it's surprising to me that people would choose to be part of something where they can be a part of the lying and the manipulation. Now, I'm not totally against social media. I'm just against the lying and manipulative side of social media. Our text for today kind of reminds me about what it means to be authentic or not. The scripture for today comes out of the book in the Bible that does not directly even mention the name of God. It's a novella that was written by an unknown author who intended for it to be read during the time of the Persian diaspora, which would have been sometime around the late 4th or early 3rd century BCE. The whole book of Esther is a very interesting read. That's why I invited you to read all of it, because it has all of the elements of a romance novel. There's Esther, a young and beautiful heroine who is a Jew. There's Haman, who's a wicked and scheming villain. There's a wise father figure, Mordecai, who was also a Jew. There's King Ahasuerus, who is an inept and laughable leader. In the story, good triumphs, evil is destroyed, and there is a happy ending. But throughout the story, there's also a downside, a shadow side, because there's racial hatred, there's the threat of genocide, and there's a lot of pride and vanity that runs through the story. I'm just going to give you a quick overview for those of you who may not have heard the story, read the story, or have forgotten the story. It goes like this. Mordecai, who is a Jew, and his cousin Hadassah, which her name is also known as Esther. Esther was raised by Mordecai when her parents died. And in this story, they were in the land of Susa when King Ahasuerus reigned over the area between India and Ethiopia. The king at this point was seeking a new queen because his initial queen, Queen Vashti, had been banished, at least banished. She just disappeared from the story in the Bible, but it was because she went against the king. But now he's looking for a new queen, and Mordecai encouraged Esther to try. Numerous young women came, and Esther was one of them that was chosen for the king's harem, which meant she had to undergo 12 months of preparation. That preparation included cosmetic treatment, and it even included how to sexually please the king. After a year of preparation, Esther finally had her turn to spend the night with the king. And apparently she did something right. I guess some folks would say she put it on him. But because of her night she spent with the king, she ended up being made queen. Now, neither Mordecai or Esther revealed the fact that she was a Jew. So she took her role well until some shady dealings happened at the hand of Haman, who had become second in command to the king. Now, Haman had a huge ego, which led him to have the king make a decree that all the citizens bow down to him. But Mordecai refused. And this caused Haman and his ego to have it out for Mordecai. But since Haman thought it would be beneath him to be seen as so petty and so concerned about one man, he decided the way to get back to Mordecai would be the genocide of all the Jews. It would be better to lead genocide instead of homicide because he thought that would belittle him. So Haman coerced the king to call for the genocide of all the Jews, not knowing the relationship between Mordecai and the queen, or that the queen herself was a Jew. But one, if not the most critical point in this story, is that although Esther had done all of the things and had made all of the right moves to get herself into such a favorable position, when it came down to the life and the well-being of her people as a whole, she was willing to risk her life and comfort to do what was right for her people. That's why the text says, "Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my maids will fast also as you do. And after that, I will go to the king, though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish." You know, Mother Teresa said, honesty and transparency make you vulnerable, but be honest and transparent anyway. So Esther went to see the king and requested the salvation of her people. And in the end, Haman, who had erected a gallows to hang Mordecai, was himself sentenced to death on that same gallows when the king realized that Haman had tried to coerce him to commit genocide due to Haman's personal vendetta that he had against Mordecai. You never know how things are going to twist and turn back on you. And you know, although God is never directly mentioned in this book, the suggestion that deliverance would come for the Jews suggests that Mordecai believed God was on their side, although the text never said so. And that brings up a good kind of sidebar lesson for us today that came from the mind of the author of Esther. That is, we don't need to talk about God. We don't need to use holy language or label ourselves in any way. What is important is how we live our faith, not how we talk about our faith, but how we live our faith. God uses us in the world to be a blessing, but maybe God would want to remain incognito. So even with no mention of God, prayers, or any reference to the temple, no religious activity at all in the whole book, even when Esther asked the Jews to fast, by the way, it wasn't because she was trying to sway God's thinking. It was because she wanted community solidarity before she went in to see the king. But even with no mention of God, it's thought that the author of this text was trying to get a message across to the Jews of his day. And the moral of this novella was that it was possible to lead a successful life even in the Gentile world in which they found themselves. So even though Esther had risen to the heights of being queen while hiding her true identity, when it came to her community, she was willing to sacrifice even as much as her own life. So if you're wondering why this story reminded me of The Circle, it's because the one who we would label a catfish of sorts was the one who won the game, not just for herself, but by revealing her true self, she saved all of her people. As I watched The Circle, I was reminded of something I read a couple of years ago that suggested that we don't send our real self into our relationships with each other. We send our representative. We send a persona that we want you to see. Have you ever gone to a funeral for someone, somebody you were close to, like a family or friend, a family member or friend? And then when they got to that point in the service where all the people line up and they give their supposedly 2-minute remark, you're sitting there left thinking, if they were talking about the same person that you knew. I remember at my own father's funeral, people were saying things about him that I never knew. I didn't share that aspect of his life, that experience with him. I remember I even wrote on my bulletin, who are they talking about? That's because in life, my father, all of us, each of us, we send our representative in a way. In that way, we're all kind of like catfish. We show up as what we think people would expect while being disconnected from the authentic manifestation of God that we really are. Our authentic self, if we were to get in touch with it, is actually more powerful, more creative, and more spiritually grounded, more loving, and even more fun than our representative in many cases. And that's one of the messages of this text. The author wanted the readers to know how powerful they could be even in undesirable circumstances. Look at how effective Esther was when she was bold enough to take the risk to talk to the king as herself. Many of us have gifts and talents that we're wasting because we or someone in our life either did not affirm us or didn't allow us to be our true self. Maybe they thought it was too risky, or in their minds that it was too crazy. How much happier would we be if we didn't have to hide or downplay who we really are? What would it mean to live life full out as the real you? I think the secret to our marriage between Shauna and myself is that I can be fully myself and she can be fully herself when we're together. Shauna sometimes asks if I knew how silly she could be at times, would I have actually married her? Well, I can tell you, I love when she turns up the music and dances around the house like nobody's watching. And I appreciate the fact that she still loves me when I spend every day in a t-shirt and athletic shorts without combing my hair, since I work from home and I never have to turn on the camera while I'm in meetings on Teams. And as she puts it, I sit here all day looking like Who Shot John? But she still loves me and accepts me and lets me be me. Most people who know me would tell you I'm pretty consistently me. That's why I'm so grateful that I don't have to be closeted, even about my sexual orientation. I can use that energy of role playing and hiding, like when I used to use my gay friend to act like he was my boyfriend so that the church leadership wouldn't figure out how to out me. It was so freeing when I got into a denomination that allowed me just to be me. So then I could do ministry with all of who I am and take all of that energy that I was wasting hiding and use that to actually get to work. What you see in me is what you get at work, at home, and in ministry. I think I told you that the last time, even in ministry, the last time I tried to do what people would call Black preaching, almost tried to get a hoop on, and I almost passed out. What's beautiful about me and who God made me is that I use another style that's more effective for reaching some people. Black preaching style is beautiful for some people, but it's not for me. I'm a witness that living life authentically is much more effective, much more peaceful, and much more fulfilling than any other kind of way that we could live. I recently read in Psychology Today that genuine people share a few key traits. They tend to take time to develop an opinion and speak their mind. They respond to internal expectations rather than external ones. They forge a unique path to fulfill their passion and purpose. They aren't threatened by failure and can admit their faults. They're often less judgmental of others, and they have strong self-esteem. It's always refreshing to be around people who are authentic. We would always prefer to be around people who are being their real self. And why is that? We're much more less likely to trust a genuine person than a fake one, because those who are their true selves are also likely to be truer and more honest to us. That's one of the ironic things about the show, The Circle. It makes me kind of laugh. The contestants often comment positively when they think somebody's being honest. Well, that's strange for a show whose premise is to strategize how to protect themselves in such a way to advance themselves in the game by being strategic and manipulative. Number two, we often associate genuineness with appealing traits such as strength of character and emotional resilience, and correctly so, as being true to yourself takes confidence, tenacity, and often it takes bravery. And finally, we're attracted to uniqueness and individuality, qualities that genuine people usually have. So if we're attracted to authentic people, why not do our best to be an authentic person? We do a lot of talking about inclusivity and diversity, but does that mean that when we live in a world full of representatives, where people are giving us what they think we want to see or what they think will benefit them, what does that mean when we talk about diversity? Who are we including in that space? We don't really know unless we're being our authentic selves. We may not be in a house playing a huge social media game, but we are residents of one more major critical house. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, he mentions an author who died and left some ideas for future stories. And one of them was that a widely separated family inherits a house in which they have to live together. And King says, this is the great new problem of humankind. We have inherited a large house, a great world house in which we have to live together, Black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, Muslim and Hindu, a family unduly separated in ideas, culture, and interests, who, because we can never live apart, must learn how somehow to live together with each other in peace. If we want to live in peace in our life, and if we want to be as powerful and as creative as we can be, we can't have a world full of catfish trying to win individually by any means necessary. Like Esther, we're at a point in our divided, violent, and environmentally damaged world where we must consider the bigger picture and not just ourselves. Martin Luther King also said in his book, but today our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant to face the challenge of change. The large house in which we live demands that we transform this world into a neighborhood, into a worldwide brotherhood, or I would say peoplehood. Together, we must learn to live as brothers and sisters, or together we'll be forced to perish as fools. We live in a house that needs a different criteria for winning. It can't just be about our individual survival. What good would it be to win individually just to live in a messed up community, a messed up family, or a messed up world? Today, I'm glad to know that we're loved by the Creator who dwells inside each of us. And one of the things we can learn from Esther is that if we want to live our most powerful, most life-enhancing, most creative self, we need to spend some time in preparation, just like she had to fast in preparation to step into her most powerful position in life. Some of us have been catfished for so long that we forgot, or maybe we never really knew our real identity. Nathaniel Hawthorne said, no one man can, for any considerable time, wear one face to himself and another to the multitude without finally getting bewildered as to which one is true. It may take some work. For Esther, it was fasting. For you, it might be journaling. It might be meditating. It might be praying. Just take some time to quiet your mind and you'll discover answers to questions that you didn't even know you had. In this world house we live in, there are neighbors who want to know us, but we first need to get to know the us we're introducing them to. Henry David Thoreau said, we're constantly invited to be who we are. My friends, we are not catfish. We are powerful, creative people created in the image of a powerful God. Thank you for listening.